Pues nada, buenos días a todas y a todos. Como miembro del grupo NOUTUR es un placer estar aquí compartiendo espacio con todas las personas, ¿no?, que de alguna manera han estado involucradas en estos proyectos, tanto en Ecoltour como en EPTUR, si bien hoy lo que haremos es presentar precisamente los resultados de este segundo proyecto. Y también ha sido un placer poder compartir, ¿no?, y colaborar con personas, con compañeros, compañeras de otras universidades, porque de alguna manera pues es la manera más adecuada, ¿no?, de crear, de co-crear, de compartir conocimiento que se va generando en otros espacios. Y como no, es un placer también estar ahora aquí pues moderando este primer bloque en el que vamos a hacer en el que se va a compartir los resultados que se han obtenido y se va a hacer a través de 4 presentaciones distintas. La idea es que cada presentación ocupe una franja de unos 20 minutos. Intentaremos dedicar 15 a hacer la presentación y unos 5 más para generar debate, generar pues cualquier comentario o aportación que se quiera hacer al respecto. Y la verdad es que hay en total 7 personas, con lo cual es un poco difícil que estemos todas aquí arriba. Entonces propongo que vengan las 2 primeras presentaciones, que en este caso son Maartje, Mar y Francesc, y luego pediré que suban las personas de las siguientes presentaciones. Si os parece bien. Bueno, mientras vamos poniendo la presentación, voy a presentar a Maartje y a Mar. Lo voy a hacer con un brevísimo currículum, porque el currículum que tienen es mucho más extenso, pero simplemente para que identifiquéis quién tenéis delante. En primer lugar tenemos a la doctora Maartje Roelofsen, investigadora postdoctoral del Grupo de Geografía Cultural de la Wageningen University and Research de los Países Bajos e investigadora también del Grupo NOUTUR. Y su investigación se ha centrado en las transformaciones digitales en el ámbito del turismo, el espacio urbano y la educación geográfica, y actualmente se centra en el trabajo de limpieza en hoteles y en el sector de alquiler vacacional, para comprender cómo este trabajo cumple con los estándares vigentes en materia de trabajo justo y protección laboral. Bienvenida, Maartje. Nuevamente. Y por otro lado tenemos a Mar Alsina, estudiante de segundo año del programa de doctorado interuniversitario en turismo RedinTour de la UOC, donde es investigadora también del grupo NOUTUR, y su investigación aborda el fenómeno workation, las prácticas laborales de los anfitriones de Airbnb y los espacios de coworking en zonas rurales. Bienvenida también, Mar. Y nada, una pincelada. En este trabajo se identifican varias estrategias, ¿no?, de los anfitriones de Airbnb y en particular se trabajan 3 de estas estrategias, como son navegar e influir en la gobernanza, transformar la economía de plataforma al uso de esta compañía y recentrar las necesidades de sus usuarios. Esto simplemente es una pincelada de lo que ahora nos van a presentar. Pues adelante, tenéis la palabra.
I will have to point towards you for the slides. Yeah, or that way. Okay, great, because I can't see the presentation in the back. Can you hear me well like this? So thank you for the introduction. It's really a pleasure to be back here. It's been 2 years since I left the WOC, my postdoc post, and it's really, really good to be back and also to look back at all of the work that we did together as a group. My postdoc actually considered the Airbnb hosts strategies to actually change Airbnb from within. But as I started during the outbreak of the pandemic, that initial project had to take on another form, and I was really glad to be able to join in on the EPTUR project, which actually considered the impact of the pandemic on tourism. And in that way, actually, we really connected my postdoc and the EPTUR project really well. And I was extremely pleased that Mar also joined us, who played a very big role in collecting the data as well for this project. And consequently, we wrote up the study and a chapter that will be published very soon in a book that US is currently editing for Edward Elgar. So yeah, it's titled Challenging Airbnb from Within. We actually look at how users of the platform challenge certain modes of governance that Airbnb operates. So we all know that there's been a lot of resistance against Airbnb within certain contexts like Barcelona, but we were interested in how users themselves think very critically about what the platform does and how they attempt to change that individually or collectively and what strategies they employ. So, oops, there we go. We find a substantial literature nowadays since the rise of the platform in 2008 that deals with the many social spatial effects that Airbnb has had on cities, many of them quite negative as well. So that's not a surprise. But what we also found is that many of these, let's say, reforms or contestations come from outside of Airbnb. We were really interested to see how some of Airbnb's practices could be challenged from within, as I mentioned before. So we really focused on the role of users in doing that. And so the mission was to explore how hosts assert their agency to resist how platform capitalism conditions their existence as hosts operating. First of all, how do they perceive and counter modes of governance, and how does it structure their everyday lives? What strategies do users have? Are they individual or collective, and how do they actually challenge the platform's modes of governance? And finally, and I think this was a bit of an ambitious question to ask, but we wanted to know if that actually made a difference as to Airbnb's operations being more sustainable or democratic. And in doing so, we wanted to contribute to a big literature on platform capitalism and highlight the role of users in bringing change from within platform corporations. And that's a literature that extends beyond Airbnb alone. It also includes other platforms. We based our research in the context of Barcelona and Amsterdam. And there were two main reasons for doing that. So we considered both cities to be one of the key cities where intense Airbnb activity takes place and where it's consequently regulated as well. So I would say that within the scope of regulation, Barcelona and Amsterdam, the municipalities have taken a more progressive stance towards Airbnb in terms of regulation. So they had that in common. But there was also another reason. Both of us and also part of members of the EPTUR project already had access to a network of participants in this economy. So for us, it was also a matter of convenience, if you would like. We could easily tap into this group because it's not actually very easy nowadays to get access to hosts, given the skepticism that surrounds Airbnb. There's a lot of trust that needs to be gained in order to interview hosts nowadays. But we did so quite successfully, also because of Mar's dedication here in Barcelona. And we ended up with a sample of 20 participants. So I'll briefly go through this, given the available time. So we base our work in the literature on platform capitalism, which is a mode of data-driven accumulation, by which platform companies draw on data and sometimes also user fees to make a profit. So users are really crucial to the production of data in this economy. And in the case of Airbnb users, both hosts and guests also pay fees on top of that, on top of bookings. But platforms in that sense are obviously not just data infrastructures. They're more than that. They actually have real effects, as we know. And they're also opposed. And usually they're opposed by people or groups or entities that do not stand on the receiving end of the platform economy. So think about residents, municipalities, but also the hotel industry. And the social movements connected to this opposition have been well documented in the literature. And in general, social movements and mobilizations against tourism have been a well-known phenomenon since the rise of mass tourism leading from the 1970s onwards. Then there's a new strand of literature that looks at platform user activism, which is a form of opposition to platform modes of governments from within the platforms themselves. Think about food delivery platforms, for example, where users want to know more about how algorithmic decision-making takes place. They want to know more about the back end of platforms. They can also stage strikes. So that has been documented as well in various platforms relation mostly to food delivery, but also other forms of exchange. What we wanted to do, however, was look at Airbnb because hosts and other users have been documented to oppose certain Airbnb-related things, but they were mostly to benefit Airbnb as a platform company. So user groups have been mobilized into host associations that that mobilize their efforts against municipality regulations so that they can continue operating in the way they prefer to do. But what we found actually is that there was not a lot done on how users challenge Airbnb's modes of governance, not necessarily to their advantage. And that was, I think, the key to this project. And now I leave the word to you.
Thank you, Maartje.
Yeah. We're not done yet. No. But thank you.
Thank you, Maartje. We'll take from here. So to get closer to approach the different aims we had, different goals we had for this project, we used a qualitative approach based on two main things. First, the in-depth interviews. We did, as Maartje mentioned, 20 interviews, 10 in Barcelona, 10 in Amsterdam, with different profiles of hosts. Some of them were doing that professionally, some of them were doing that all year long. Others were more occasional hosts, not depending as much on the incomes from the platform. There were also diversity of listings, whole house, rooms, etc. We record, transcribe, and analyze those interviews, as well as analyzing the qualitative information and content that we found in Airbnb's website about their protocols, especially the ones related to the hospitality care, progress and policies regarding the cleaning when COVID took place. As per the main results of our study, we differentiate them into blocks. The first one is about the philosophical discrepancies that we found that hosts identify between their beliefs and the ones from Airbnb platform. And the second block that I will tackle later is how they actually approach them, how they resist and which strategies they apply in those situations. Regarding the philosophical discrepancies, we found that they are aware of how they relate or not with different approach that they have to the platform offerings. And they believe, as a recurrent point, the different participants in the interview, they identify this shift between the Airbnb's core beliefs when it started to nowadays. They identify especially this change from pro-host attitudes to pro-guest attitudes, with a shift on being more focused on money making from Airbnb point of view, And what one of the participants deemed as a cultural American culturally approach, focus on this money making, where anything goes, as he phrased. They also found challenging or discrepancies on the cleaning protocols that arise with COVID-19, finding a mismatch related as well to these cultural differences with the suggestions for generating or providing the cleaning and the hospitality service during that time. What was highlighted from this part was the lack of strong loyalties that even those hosts who depended extremely economically on the income that they got from using the platform, they were still not focusing, not providing like high loyalties to Airbnb, diversifying with other platforms whenever they felt the need to. Then, as per acts of resistance and collective strategies that we identified during our research or during the analysis, in general, we found that they have mixed feelings about the things that the app or the platform requires them to do, and they still want to preserve their agency, even if they have to agree with the platform's terms and conditions for use. So they are not reluctant to implement strategies when they feel the need to keep their agency or their statements or their point of view. So basically, what the host agreed is that they accept formally these protocols to be able to operate within the platform, but then they represent the listings in a way that favors the kind of bookings they want to have, something that it's not really recommended from Airbnb points of view. They also use different tools or different apps outside of Airbnb to keep some control on their listings or their bookings on their properties, trying to go outside of the recommendations from the app, disabling automatic bookings, using WhatsApp to communicate instead of the platform itself. They were trying to keep this control. Also, as we mentioned, they are not extremely loyal to the app. If they have another similar platform that they can help distributing or diversifying the income that they get, they are going to use it. And something that we found was a bit unexpected in line of what Maartje was presenting a second ago. They are also advocating for regulations on a more governmental level to regulate their work, because they perceive it as an extreme time-consuming task, and they look forward this professionalism of their activity and the protection that it will entail with certain regulations. So, as a final conclusion, trying to bring together the questions that we had with the findings we got. On a first note, this how the Airbnb hosts perceive this mismatch or these encounters with the governance that the platform does. They are critically aware that there's discrepancies, and they accept that and still play an important role on keeping their own practices, their own values, their own agency. For example, one of the main repeated aspects was about the cleaning and understanding of hospitality culturally that they found, that they challenge Airbnb with that. And this idea that they accept only the terms and conditions that the app requires them to be able to operate, but then they do that in their conditions. About the strategies, we mentioned them. Also, an important one was the fact that they organize themselves to tackle when they find lack of support from the Airbnb, this shift that we mentioned. They organize themselves to deal with issues when they when new people start in the platform and doesn't know how to operate. They help each other, but also when they face legal consequences, now that there's political regulations that go with that. And they advocate, related also with the more sustainable and democratic approach, with the host advocates to protect the neighborhood relationships. They try to bring closer and fight against this bad press that was previously identified in other research. How they try to bring back to community, try to bring the guests closer to the local restaurants or commerce and so on. Even though we identified a difference on that approach, on this trying to democratize their activity, that's something that professional hosts or all year long hosts engage more than occasional hosts. Occasional hosts don't feel the need to be as active in these super groups or in these advocating for their rights, their professionalization, legalization, or regularization of their activities. I don't know if Maartje wants to add something else, or if you have any other questions, but that would be all for us. Thank you.
Pues muchas gracias, Maartje, Mar, por la presentación de los resultados de vuestra participación en el proyecto. Y cedemos ahora la palabra a quien quiera hacer algún comentario, alguna pregunta, alguna... Sí, un momentito.
Many thanks. Just want to very quick note, because very recently I was made aware of the latest tactics of Airbnb owners to escape regulation, which apparently in Menorca there is a boom of houses that are put on the market on Friday afternoon and are taken out of the market on Sunday evening, early Monday morning, because the Airbnb police only works from Monday to Friday. So they are renting these places only on the weekend, or they're only there. You only can book at the weekend because the administrative work, it only happens from Monday to Friday. I thought it was like, I never will come out with that idea myself. I thought it was very interesting to put in here.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Really, really enjoyed it. It's completely related to Paul's comment. I was going to ask you about these kind of new creative tactics on the part of the Airbnb host lobby, as I live next door to a new building with 48 apartments that 3 years ago would have been on Airbnb short term. And the tactic of this property owner is to put them out as medium-term rentals, not via Airbnb, but via other platforms. And it's another example of these kind of tactics to get around Airbnb's restrictions. I don't know if you had any thoughts on these kind of increasingly creative tactics.
Great, yeah. So we've not looked at Menorca, but I think it's a great thing to raise, and also about the strategies that hosts have, because we've indeed interviewed hosts that turned out not to follow the regulations. I mean, we've obviously anonymized our data and don't want to be very explicit about it, but there were hosts that were operating all year round, which is illegal in Amsterdam. And apparently it's still possible, even though there is a new EU directive of sharing data, who is operating on these platforms. So I'm also amazed that people are still able to advertise their listings and actually rent out through the platform without that being visible to municipalities. Because why would we have to visit a place if we have that data on a computer screen? And it should be relatively easy to disable that possibility if it's illegal. So our focus was really on how users actually contradict Airbnb's policies, philosophies, because there is this assumption that all hosts are pro Airbnb and they just appropriate it to earn more money. But in this case, and I guess that Mar already spoke to that, what we found quite striking, and that's maybe also because we had a large sample of professional hosts, is that many of the people we interviewed actually see it as a profession. They see it as work, and what they do not like is that there is a big group of people appropriating the platform who do not have respect for local culture, like the rules and regulations around short-term rent. And actually, make this provide a bad reputation for the platform. So that's what we found quite striking, and that they were pro-regulation. They want clarity on who is able to operate through these platforms, what are the rules and regulations, maintaining neighborly relations in a good way. So yeah, that was that is to say that there is a critical group of users that use these platforms. And also, quite strikingly, whether it's Airbnb or Booking.com, for them it's the ease of use. And I guess they used Airbnb because it still has a monopoly. They are by far the biggest platform operational still in European cities for sure. And that's why they use them. But they also strategize to put out their listings on other platforms for the fear of being regulated, indeed, and not being able to operate their businesses as well, but also because they sometimes feel more aligned with the business model or the philosophy. This very culturally American underpinning of Airbnb is something that irritates many hosts. And it goes down to the nitty-gritty of how they need to clean, to how they need to welcome the guests and communicate with them, being prompt, saying yes to everything. We've interviewed hosts that were really clear that they do not allow certain guests to come in, and they're very happy to be direct about that. But that doesn't always align with what Airbnb wants hosts to do. So yeah, I think there is this awareness of what's going on. Hosts are not simply unaware of what's happening through Airbnb and the negative consequences of that. Yeah. Did you want to add something? I guess no. Yeah. A very long answer.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm wondering, because it's something that I found in my own work about discourses. So I didn't enter into directly the discourses of the platform of the owner of the apartment, but I found in let's say more general discourses that there is a attempt, I'm not sure it is true, of distinction between different platforms according with the level of the apartments. So for instance, I found there is a platform that I don't know how to pronounce, is VRO or something similar, that they distinguish themselves, comparing themselves with Airbnb, for instance. I mean, and it's clearly a discursive strategy directly linked, I think, with Bourdieu's idea of distinction. So instead of just differentiating because of the place where the apartment is, the size of the apartment, and size, price, etc., they try to create a discourse of distinction, comparing with other, basically comparing themselves against Airbnb. I don't know if that exists. That is something that I found is very punctual. I don't know if you have an idea.
So, as we mentioned, they are not afraid of. They look forward to diversify if they have other platforms where they feel that can align, as Maartje was mentioning as well. But from the host point of view, they don't really enter in this place of the power place between the different platforms. And so I think it's more a marketing strategy from the platform itself. I think that for what we saw, the hosts don't really make a distinction. Their priorities lay somewhere else. They want to rent their apartment, they want to rent their place. Some of them because they really depend on that, as Maartje was mentioning. Some of them are that's their main source of income. There's their job. So we don't really find this distinction in that sense, I think. I don't know if you want to add something.
I think that covers it really well. That's the part on disloyalty where what we write about. It's about infrastructure that needs to be is ease of use, but also reach. So again, and that's where Airbnb has a monopoly still. And VRBO, I think, is maybe the second or the third, together with Booking.com. Booking.com is now also a very, very attractive platform for short-term rent to be operated through. But I think Mark covered the rest very well. Diversifying is also a strategy to make sure they generate as much income as they can And they also noted the difference in guests that come through, for example, booking.com, which is not always easier. So booking.com is used also by hotel guests, and they usually expect different standards. So oftentimes people book Airbnb short-term rentals on booking.com and come in with the expectation that they will receive, a certain standard of hospitality, and then they find themselves deluded. So different platforms for different reasons, but mostly to diversify and to ensure continuous income. Yeah.
Perfecto, pues hacemos una última aportación.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm really happy to see how this line of research has been growing up. I just want to ask a question about if you have seen or if you have paid attention to different profiles of host, and also if you have paid attention to make a comparison between the two cities, no? To see if the different profiles of hosts and also the different, let's say, city cultures, no? Have influence in the resilience strategy or the policy strategy against or not against Airbnb. Because I remember to be at the beginning of this research in this embryonic phase, and I remember that we discussed a lot about the necessity to interview different profiles of hosts, because other studies that we have developed within this project and also in ECOTOUR have demonstrated that these different profiles have different behaviors, follow different strategies, and that contribute differently to the platform. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. We also received that as feedback on our chapter. What are the comparative aspects of this study? So we did choose deliberately two cities that were quite progressive in regulating Airbnb, but there's still some difference. There's similarities and differences, also in the way in which the platform is regulated, for example, through licensing. But in Barcelona, there's also a difference with Amsterdam in that Amsterdam, you can rent all year round rooms in your home. So if you have people in your residence, you can do that all year round. You can only rent out an entire property for 30 days a year. And as I mentioned, I did have some hosts who clearly transgressed those regulations in very strategic ways. One of them was building in extra doors. So after the front door, there are two doors that separate the property very conveniently. But in both cases, in Barcelona and Amsterdam, we had we call them professional because they operate all year round, have very clear hospitality standards. Some of them operate multiple properties at the same time. So we could compare. I need to think very carefully what the differences were, but maybe Mar, you can say something about that, or am I leaving you with a difficult question?
Putting me on the spot. There were some difference about how not strongly, but they had different approaches on the regulation side. Both types of profiles were advocating for having their activities regulated. Those who were doing it more professionally, those who were doing it more personally. But if their income depended on that, if their income was highly dependent on the Airbnb, they both advocated for it. And ones were more concerned about who was gonna be allowed to enter Airbnb, for example, and the others were more concerned about their possibility to continue using the platform. That was one of the differences that I remember within the professionalization level kind of way. Also, there seemed to be a bit of a cultural mindset behind the two cities, in the sense of how they understood this need. From some people, kind of felt that in Barcelona, the word need this highly dependence or the using Airbnb as a safe from when the economic crisis in 2008 happened. It was something that was brought up more consistently, and in Amsterdam it was more something of, oh, I have some free space, I'm gonna use it, I'm gonna give it another purpose. So that was also a difference. But apart from that, and as Maartje mentioned, the different regulations in both cities, the strategies they implemented, they were quite similar, I think.